So, hello. This is the very first outing of my debut collection, Outlandish. Thank you. The book's officially published later this month, and I'm launching the collection with Claire Shaw and Sarah Wimbush on Blood Axe's YouTube channel on the 31st of May at 7 p.m. And I really hope that you'll join us because it's going to be a wonderful evening. And yeah, it feels very timely to be here, giving what is my first reading from the book, because I wrote many of the poems that are in this book during my PhD here at Newcastle Uni, and this poetry festival has provided without fail an annual watering hole to really nourish and inform my practice. And it's a huge, huge privilege. I know that's a huge privilege to be here today to represent this collection and my family who are all in here, so I'm massively proud of it. Let's jump in. Let's hear a poem. This is from Vault. There's a rifle in the cupboard and the dogs need walked. Back and forth a ball drums the house wall, edging the urn they can't agree what to do with forward. The girls ride leaning gravestones like ponies, their mouths stuck with brambling, nettle-stung ankles, grazed giddy-up green. They smash bees from jam jars, run as the lads kick the ball against the wall where he's sleeping, till his fists scream on the glass and they flush out like so many bees or game back to the moor where pawn pulps open crotches on lampposts which blush and blink as the buses come in, asking for exact change and leave without passengers or windows. And I wrote that poem, that lyric poem, about the estate that I grew up on in the northeast, in Darlington, my hometown, or Darlow, as I call it. If you lived in the parts of town that kind of pretended that estate didn't exist, you would call it Darlington. It's very, very proper, whereas I'm from Darlow, very much from Lascelles Park on Darlow's estate. And Darlington's an interesting place geographically because it's on a kind of crossroads in the northeast. It's a thoroughfare to other market towns. And because of this, there's a very large Gypsy, Roma and traveller population there, including my own family. And the next poem that I'm going to read for you, it contains a series of the kinds of slurs, the romantic stereotypes, words that people use to describe us that confront Gypsy, Roma, traveller people on a regular basis, the kinds of multiple identities that are at play once you disclose your ethnicity to someone. And just as an FYI, don't use these words. The poem will tell you why. Self-portrait as 100 travellers. Here, no good, nomad, Roma, rover, rom, dom, rye, raider, reaver, truant, turnpike, trash, tatter, tinner, tinker, toad, trickster, tinsmith, tarmacker, bolter, tea leaf, peddler, potter, king, cuckoo, knot, outlaw, trespasser, straw hat, scrapper, Johnny, far, moonman, fly, fitter, flitter, migrant, sharper, harper, dipper, sleeper, soothsayer, Heathcliff, hawker, knacker, clogger, lock, idler, thief, jailbird, Lovell, Boswell, Lee, wagon carried, wayfarer, crooked, filthy, floater, vagrant, vermin, band, muse, wanderer, journeyer, vagabond, smith, gadabout, me, flashy, scum, will-o'-the-wisp, lowlife, rambler, pathfinder, drifter, carney, chav, dog, dregs, Carmen, Maggie, Meg, Dove, Ratter, Pilgrim, Peddler, Seer, Witch, Rabble, Raggle, Taggle, Rag and Bone, Gitano, Egyptian, Gyprat, Gypsy, Gypsy, Gyppo, Pikey, Gone. And I wrote that poem in response to the Firle Bonfire Society in Sussex. Were very prominently on my mind. The penultimate slur in that poem is not one that I'm comfortable hearing, and it's not one that I'm comfortable using, but it needs to be in the poem. This Bonfire Society in Sussex decided that they were going to parade a caravan through town with a registration plate that read P1KEY, and then publicly set it alight. And a traveller family with young children were painted in the windows of this burning caravan, alongside the words, "As you like ye driveways," or "fair?" And the Firle Bonfire Society were asked by the Racial Equality Commission, quite rightly, what was going on there. And all they said about this effigy that was paraded through town was, it was emphatically not a racist comment. In other comments that aren't racist, we're a week on since the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Bill received royal assent. And if you don't know very much about this bill, I think you should get yourself clued up, because part 1 of the bill means that public protest is being suppressed. Is this public protest? Who knows where we'll be in a few years' time? Who decides these boundaries? And another part of the bill is that if you are found to be trespassing, you can be fined £2,500 and you can have your vehicle taken from you. And for people who live on the road, Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people who live nomadically, if you have your vehicle taken from you, then that's also your home, so you will be made homeless. And you know that this law isn't going to apply to people glamping in VWs, camper vans or whatever. It's a targeted law that's aimed to stop Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people from stopping. We've lived on the road for many centuries, and traditionally we lived in wooden Vardos, which is, I guess, where I'll take you next. This is Vardo. And this poem has an epigraph from Brigflats, which I'll read to you in my best Bunting-esque Northumbrian. Vardo. Rut thud the rim. That's Basil, yeah. Sure as the colts will nag the fillies, our living wagon prints itself across my mind. Lacquered like spring woods where it atches a spell, it's all cut in bonny birds and brushed with roses, windows laced with cockled glass. A wheel bird sent up from its scrape turns like silver in pockets, or my head in this flat, tight as bow-top tarp, static as pike skin on flame. And in the Romany tongue, Vardo means living wagon, and I suppose that's a very fundamental piece of language, because it is a living wagon in that it keeps you alive, it keeps you safe, it keeps you sheltered, it keeps you warm. But it's also keeping us alive in another way, because travel is our cultural tradition, and to live on the road is a really key part of our identity. So instead of kind of essentially repealing the Vagrancy Act, which the government has currently done, which makes homelessness illegal, we need the state to start providing Gypsy, Roma, Traveller people with safe stopping places, so sites where travellers can stop as part of a negotiated stopping route, rather than having laws that just say, not here. Because what can we do with that? Where? So yeah, let's move on to another poem. What was I going to do next? Oh, right, okay, yeah, this is a bit of a palette change. So in the South Park in Darlington, there is a massive pink granite rock that's at the entrance to the park. And I went there with school one time, and I remember being told that this rock had sort of come down the River Tees, and that's how it ended up in the park. And this is the poem that I'm going to read you next. Got its name from this rock. It's an erratic, and erratics rocks that move glacially, sort of from one place to another. So it's a type of rock that doesn't belong in the place which it's found in. And I found out it didn't actually travel down it was found in the River Tees, but it didn't sort of hop up onto the park top. This is a 12-ton rock, and it got lifted up into a truck and carried by 8 men, and it fell off, sort of still in the same spot at the entrance of this park. Presumably they'd had enough, they were just like, no, we'll just leave it there. It's an entrance point now. There we go. So this is Teasdale erratics. Overnight, they arrive in the gap between the prefabs, whose sides are dashed with pebbles and a sign swung on one screw. No ball games. 3 boulders are planted on the grassy path, earless skulls crowned in whitewash, 2 ton, like the chip the teacher pointed out on her shoulder, sent her off with a slap to the head. She comes here instead to fizz open pop as she sits on the middle one, listening for his quad's buzz up and down the Queen's Highway, the rider shirtless and at speed, without licence or helmet. And my next poem is written with another giant in mind. This time it's a literary giant, William Wordsworth. And in his Guide to the Lakes, Wordsworth really vehemently opposed the introduction of larch trees, which he said turned green too soon, because the native trees there have a different kind of cyclical growth process. And so, yeah, I'm interested in the idea of native species, and these larch trees that were being introduced to build ships at the time. I became kind of compelled with them and how they're kind of like people who aren't native, and the way that they are responded to by the locals. What do we mean? What do we mean by local? So I wrote this next one with that in mind. This is larch. Uprooted from Carpathian crests, we burnish in the native green. Out of season, he mistrusts our sudden height, but can't convince the canopy, this company of outskirt trees, each conceding dirt or light to the other. He finds our fires as foreign as his gypsies, sheltered here, blanketed by walls to raise ringlets, wreaths of smoke given back to the silver sky that shakes with murmurations of winged pollen, far thunder. He begged us, stop sporing spectres, burnt beltane boughs to ward us off returning to the near dark. Listen low enough, you'll hear us, trailing needled shawls down the corpse road. Larch sisters, bewitching the fells even black with a bloomery of cast iron tongues. Our feet forge ember passage, keep on overrunning these hills. I have just 2 more poems, and then I'll finish. So, as we're in Wordsworth's territory here, we're in the lakes, let's pop over to nearby Appleby in Westmoreland, which is the site where Gypsy, Roman and traveller people have converged for centuries to wash and to trade horses. It's also an opportunity for the community to kind of come together and to catch up, for families to meet. And it's the one time where we're in the majority and not the minority. This is Haunt. Something about not wanting to be touched kept us coming back. Or the smell. I'm galloping away on it now. You caught me first by the beach, lids tight, lungs full of hoss, nodding to the hooves' dropped rhythm. I couldn't tell you we were gypsies, admit to the skim of blood that can't settle, that the landscape I am in has to change. You'd never take in the air at Appleby Fair, so thick with horse and home. Shirtless kids riding bareback in the rain and the sound of wet hoof on wet stone. And you know, the way that I talk about my heritage here is, it's positive and it's open, but this hasn't always been the case, because you just don't know how people will react, and everyone seems to have an opinion about my ethnicity and my culture that's often so far removed from the reality and from the people that I love. Yeah, it can be pretty scary telling a friend even about your ethnicity, and that poem really is about when I started dating and realising, oh my God, I'm going to have to disclose this information. So yeah. I'll finish with a poem that I wrote on a very long walk, a very, very long walk. It was a 60-mile walk, no less, and not all of it was very flat. And this was with my good friend, the writer Damien Labar. Damien has an amazing book called The Stopping Places, which came as a great steer for my writing, and this book I don't think would exist without it. So I'm very glad that he wrote it. Damien and I walked together from the Scottish borders to Lindisfarne, which is Holy Island, and together we were tracking a historic Gypsy Roma traveller pilgrim path, and we were trying to trace our presence along that path. But on that journey, we were also establishing a new presence. We were keeping our culture alive. We were wild camping in Scotland, and that's where it's legal. And we were getting some ground under our feet, talking about contemporary identity and writing poems like this final one, which is dedicated to Damien, for giving me the strength really to keep going and to keep speaking out about these things. So this poem started at the beginning of our journey at Eildon in Scotland. At Eildon, hard into heels, we found ourselves walking to rise with the sisters, the van ever below, safe as houses. Trusted with distance, you steady the pack, cinching my collar that pulled me back. Steep, the old way knew what lived in there, pressing as a lurcher kneels onto a hare, brindles its curve into the snow's unrest. It saw the clearing in a black wood and a lass behind the lamp who looks as I did then, heather scuffed, overstepping fizzy wires, slicing light onto birch backs, her boots, steel signs. Eildon knows our stake. Hawkers, moon men, gypsies, names we tried to hide. Out of Scott's view, we sit a spell in the saddle to unshoulder its writhe. Every stitch read trespass. I couldn't leave it behind. Thank you, and please do go to the tent and get a copy of this if you can and support Blood Axe. They're a wonderful publisher, and my huge thanks to Neil for bringing this book into fruition. So thanks very much, everyone.